All right, here's your answer for station number 2. Number 1, it says, in humans, hair on fingers is dominant. I'm going to underline that, that's important. It's dominant to no hair on fingers. We know that dominant means a capital letter, so I'm going to write that down. And if it's capital, we know that a capital letter is going to apply to this guy right here, so hair on finger. So I'm going to go ahead and pick a letter. I'm going to go ahead and use an F. So I'm going to write F here. The great thing about genetics problems is that if you know one thing is dominant, we always know what the other phenotype has to be. This guy has to be recessive because it's the only other option left, and they can never be the same thing. So I know this is going to be a lowercase f. Then it says 2 heterozygous individuals are crossed. So we know both parents are going to be the same and both of them are heterozygous. Heterozygous is one of our key vocab words, and we know that that means that our 2 alleles or letters are going to be different. So I'm going to write that down as well. That means each parent is going to be big F, little f. And I can go ahead and set up my Punnett square. So I'm going to put my parents on the top and also on the side. And let me just remind you really quickly that whenever we do Punnett squares, whatever's on the side comes into the box and whatever's on top comes into the box. So if that's true, let's go ahead and figure out what's in the first quadrant of our Punnett square. So we should have big F, big F. We're going to do the same thing in this quadrant. We should have big F, little f. Here we're going to bring in our big F and our little f, but we're going to put the capital letter first always. That's just the way that we do things in genetics. And in this last square, we're going to have little f, little f. I also like to write down inside of the Punnett square boxes, and you don't have to do this, but I find that it makes it easier to answer the questions once I complete the Punnett square, to write down what the phenotypes are. So if this box is big F, big F, big F, I know that that means that we have hair on our fingers. So I'm going to write hair. If I have a big F, little f, this guy is stronger than this guy, so you never see it. So we're also going to write hair here. This is the same genotype, so we're also going to have hair. And this is our only Punnett square quadrant where we have no hair. So I'm going to write that down. Now that we have that done, let's go ahead and look at what questions we need to answer. A says, what are the possible genotypes? Genotypes, remember, genotype sounds like the word gene. So I want to know what are the letter combinations of our offspring. So let's just look. In the first quadrant, it's possible for these parents to make big F, big F. It's also possible for them to make a gene combination of big F, little f, and then we can also make little f, little f. So it's possible for these 2 parents to make babies, to make all 3 types of babies, a homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, as well as a heterozygous offspring. Let's look at B. What is the probability that their child will not have hair on their fingers? So all we have to do, if we're looking at probability, we're looking at a percentage. We just have to count how many boxes have no hair. So if I look, there's only 1. Remember, we always treat this like a dollar. How many quarters does it take to make a dollar? It takes 4. So if 1 quadrant is filled in and that's no hair, we know that it's going to be 25%. For C, it asks, what is the expected ratio of hairy-fingered to hairless-fingered children? So if I want a ratio, I need to ask myself, so I'm going to set up my ratio. It's going to be a number here and a number here. But we have to ask ourselves, what order are we looking the ratio to be in? So we're looking for hair to no hair. So let's see how many have hair. We just have to count up how many boxes. It looks like we have 3. How many don't have hair? Looks like we have 1. There's the answer to number 1. If you have any questions, please make sure that you ask in class because you're going to see questions like this on your test. All right, let's jump down to question number 2. For number 2, we again have a Punnett square. We're going to work out our Punnett square just like we did previously. So it says in chickens, the allele for brown feathers is dominant. So I'm going to go ahead and circle that. This I made easy for you because I already told you what allele to use. So I'm going to go ahead and put in a capital F for brown. And that means red feathers have to be recessive. And again, made it easy for you, already gave you the allele. So I'm going to go ahead and write lowercase f here. So now all we need to do is figure out what our parents look like. So we have a chicken that's big F, crossed with a rooster that is heterozygous, so big F, little f. So again, already given to you, all you have to do is set up your Punnett square. So I'm going to put my homozygous dominant parent up top and my heterozygote on the side. Again, doesn't matter where you put it. And now we need to go ahead and fill in our Punnett squares. Just a reminder, whatever's on the side comes in, whatever's on the top comes in. So if that's the case, let's see what should go in this first square. I should have a big F, big F. For this quadrant, we're going to have big F, big F. Here we're going to have big F, little f, and then big F, little f. And again, I always like to write down what the phenotypes look like to make it easier to answer the questions. So if I'm big F, we know that big F codes for brown. So this guy is going to have brown feathers. And this guy looks exactly the same. So we're also going to have brown feathers here. And if I'm big F, little f, once again, this capital letter is stronger than this lowercase, so this is still going to be brown, as well as this last one. So let's see if we can answer some questions now. What is the probability that the offspring will have brown feathers? So again, probability, we're looking for a percentage, and we're trying to see how many have brown feathers. So according to our Punnett square, there's a 100% chance that our babies will have brown feathers. For B, what is the expected ratio of brown to red? Again, when we have a ratio, we're going to set up two numbers in this case. We're looking for the number of brown to the number of red. Well, if we look, how many brown babies do we have? We have 4. How many are not brown? Should be 0. So it should be 4 to 0. And remember, that can be reduced to 1 to 0 because this might be the option on your test instead of this, but they mean the same thing. All right, let's look down at question number 3. Number 3 says, in daffodils, 5 petals is dominant, and we already have the allele, capital P, to 3 petals. So we know this is recessive, and we've already been given the allele. So I'm going to go ahead and write down 5 petals should be a capital P, and 3 petals should be a lowercase p. And I'm going to do my best to make sure that those two P's look different, although P's aren't the best letters to use. So let's figure out our parents. We have a heterozygous flower. Heterozygous means different, and I've already given you the alleles. So it's going to be capital P, lowercase p. And a homozygous recessive flower. So little p, I'm going to put that here. And we're just going to set up our cross. So I'm going to put one parent at the top, big P, little p, and then I'm going to put my homozygous recessive parent on the side. So just a reminder of how we set up our cross, whatever's on the side comes in, whatever's on the top comes in. So if that's the case, in this first quadrant, I'm going to have big P, little p. And then in the second, little p, little p. In the third, big P, little p. And then little p again. And just like I've done for the first 2 examples, I want to go ahead and write in what my phenotypes look like to make it easier to analyze the Punnett square when we have to answer questions A and B. So if I'm big P, little p, that means that I have 5 petals, because as long as I have one capital letter, that's how many I have. So I'm going to go ahead and write 5, and I'm going to write 5 in here because these look exactly the same. Little p means I have 3 petals. So this is going to be this, and this is also going to be 3. Now let's look at what our possible answers can be. For number 3, what are the possible genotypes of the offspring? Again, when I'm asking for genotypes, I want to know what the genes are or what the letter combinations are. So what are the possible combinations of genes? I can be big P, or I can be little p, Those are the only possible combinations I could have with this particular grouping of parents. For B, it asks, what is the expected ratio? Again, so I'm going to have a number to a number with 5 petals to 3. So let's count up how many have 5. We have 2 quadrants that have 5, so we're going to write 2. And we have 2 quadrants that have 3, so we're going to write 2. And this can be reduced, just so there's no confusion, to 1 to 1. They mean the exact same thing. All right, let's jump down to number 4. For number 4, it says in humans, the allele for black hair is dominant. So black hair is dominant. We know it's going to be a capital letter. I've already given you the letter to use. It's going to be H, so I'm going to fill in my key. And the allele for red hair is recessive. I've already given you the letter to use. It's going to be a lowercase h. Now I need to figure out what my parents are. So we have a homozygous dominant female. So we need to look at this word homozygous. Homozygous means same. The word dominant means capital. So we're going to have 2 capital letters. That's going to be parent number 1. And then we have a heterozygous male. The word heterozygous means different. So I'm going to have a capital letter, lowercase letter. I'm going to go ahead and put my parents onto my Punnett square, always on the outside. And again, just a reminder, whatever's on the side comes into the box and whatever's on top comes into the box. So if that's the case in this first quadrant, I'm big H, big H. Here I'm also going to be big H, and then these last two quadrants are going to be the same. They're going to be big H, little h, big H, little h. And again, I always want to write in the phenotypes. It makes it so much easier to analyze the question that you might be asked. So if I'm big H, that means that I'm going to be black, so I'm going to write that. And this one's also going to be black because they're the same exact genotype. And if I'm big H, little h, again, this big H is stronger than the little h, so you're only going to see what the big H codes for, which is once again going to be black hair. So let's look at A. It says, what are the possible genotypes of my offspring? What are the possible genotypes? Well, in this first box, we could be big H, and it's also possible for these two parents to make a baby that is big H, little h. For B, what is the probability that the child will have red hair? For probability, we're looking for a percentage. So what's the probability of having red hair? Well, it doesn't look like, according to this Punnett square, that that's possible. So it's a 0% chance that these parents could have a baby with red hair. So we're going to write 0%. And then for C, what is the expected ratio? So again, we're going to do a number to a number of black to red. So how many of our boxes are black? We have 4. How many are red? 0. And then this can be reduced again to 1 to 0. All right, let's look at number 5. For number 5, it says, in chimpanzees, the allele for a short tail is recessive. That's important. I'm going to circle this. So I know that short tails, we're going to use a, we're going to use a lowercase to represent this. And the allele for long tails is dominant. So I know that I'm going to use a capital to represent this. I'm going to go ahead and use L's because we're talking about, T's, because they look different in the capital and lowercase form. So long tail is dominant, it's a capital letter, so I'm going to use a capital T. And then short tails are lowercase because they're recessive, so that's going to be a lowercase t. So now let's figure out our parents. It says a heterozygous chimp. Heterozygous, this is an important vocab word, means different. So I know that I'm going to have a big T, little t. Is crossed with a short-tailed chimp. Now, this is supposed to confuse you. If a chimp has a short tail, there's only one way to have a short tail. According to my key, it has to be 2 lowercase letters because it's recessive. So I'm going to go ahead and put one parent across the top, the other parent on the side. And just a reminder again, whatever's on the side comes in and whatever's on top comes in. So in this first quadrant, I'm going to be big T, little t. This next one, little t, big T, little t, and then little t, little t. Let's go ahead and write down what each one of these phenotypes is. If I'm big T, little t, this is going to be a long tail. Little t is going to be short. And then these look exactly the same. So this is going to be short, and this guy is going to be long. So let's see if we can answer these questions. What are the possible genotypes of the offspring? So we're looking again, the letter combination. So we could be big T, or we can be little t, little t. For B, what is the probability, so we're looking for, again, a percentage, that the offspring will have long tails? Well, we just have to count it up again. So we have 1 box, 2 box. So that's 2 quarters. 2 quarters, when we add them up, always equals 50 cents. So this is going to be 50%. And then letter C, what is the expected ratio? So we're going to have a number to a number of long to short. So how many of our babies have short tails? Looks like we have 2. How many have long tails? It looks like we have 2. And this could also be reduced to 1 to 1. All right, let's look on to number 6. Number 6 is our last practice problem. For number 6, it says, in elephants, a combination of small ears and large ears alleles produce a new phenotype that is medium ears, so SL. Now this is an example of incomplete dominance. Something to remember in incomplete dominance. Anytime incomplete dominance is taking place, you're going to have 3 phenotypes. For everything else that we've talked about, we've only ever had 2. Things are either tall or short. They're either long or short. They're either red or blue. In this case, we have 3 different phenotypes. We have small ears, we have large ears, and we have medium ears. So it says fill in the Punnett square for each of the crosses below and then answer the questions. So for our cross, we're going to have two heterozygous individuals. Heterozygous means different, and we can see that because this is an S and an L, and this is also an S and an L. So I'm going to go ahead and put my parents in, SL, SL. And the way that we do this cross, even though it's incomplete dominance, we're still going to use the same rules for our Punnett square. Whatever's on the side comes in, whatever's on the top comes in. If that's the case, in this first quadrant, we're going to have big S, big S. In this next quadrant, we're going to have SL. In this quadrant, we're going to have SL. And then in this last quadrant, we're going to have LL. Now, I want to, in this case, it's particularly important to write down what the phenotypes look like because it can get confusing. If I am SS, according to my word problem, that means that I have small ears. If I'm SL in this case, it means that I have medium ears. This is the first time that we're seeing an incomplete phenotype in our practice. This is going to be the same thing. It's still going to be medium. And then our last one is 2 lowercase l, so this is going to be large. So we have 3 different phenotypes represented when we cross these two parents. So let's look at A. What is the probability that the offspring of this cross will have small ears? And if we're doing probability, we're looking for a percentage. So we just have to count up how many of our babies have small ears. It looks like we only have 1, so it's going to be 25%. For B, what is the probability that the offspring will have large ears? Again, we're looking for a percentage. We just have to count. It looks like we only have 1 quadrant, so the answer for B is also going to be 25%. For C, what is the probability the offspring will have medium ears? Well, let's count. We have 2 quadrants, so 2 quarters, so that's going to be 50%. And then for D, what is the expected ratio of small to medium to large ears? So we're going to have 3 numbers here. The first one represents how many small ears we have. The second one medium, and the third one large. So how many small ears do we have? We have 1. Medium ears, we have 2. And then large ears, we have 1. All right, I hope that you guys fared well. If you have any problems, this is going to highlight what areas you need to study tonight as you prepare for your test.